part. Uh, we saw that there are environmental forces which act upon businesses or organization. Now, environmental scanning is one of the important aspect because it keeps the organizations on toes. It leads to identification of any issues that affect the organization, and based upon it, the organizations can make a move. The organizations, those who are more reactive and prompt, okay, they take the particular action or they react in the assumption that in future the scenario will change. They take the decisions and move ahead, and those organizations or firms, those who ignore the changes, the environmental aspect, those who just uh, do not give weightage to the changing scenario. For such companies, maybe because of the competitors ahead, when the competitor enters, these companies, they do not stay in the market. The survival becomes a problem for these organizations. That's why the managers, they have to be on their toes. They have to think of various options or alternatives with reference to scanning of this environment. Now, based upon this environmental scanning, a matrix is prepared by the organization in which the environmental issues and its relative impact is mapped, and it is distributed among the 9 cells of a matrix. Like, for example, if you have the opportunity and the threat matrix, naturally, when the environmental scanning takes place, one of the either attribute, okay, it affects the organization in form of a threat or opportunity. Either it, suppose if you take advent of new technology, it will give avenues and options for the organizations. While maybe, suppose if the government comes up with a new rule, new norm that can prove a threat for the company. So, what is the impact of such decisions on the organization? Whether it uh, impacts the organizations on a critical basis, or it's just the medium, it's just on a higher side. So, here the companies have a matrix of impact on the businesses, or maybe probability of impact of that factor or attribute, whether it is high, whether it is medium, whether it is low, whether one needs to watch it, because there are some attributes where you just need to keep a watch. You don't know when they may enter as a low or medium phase and be a critical one. So afterwards, it should not happen that it enters a critical phase. Also high priority or low priority. So based upon this mapping of the matrix, the managers can take a call and take a decision. Now, critical issues have to be addressed with most attention. High priority issues are those which have a medium to high probability of occurrence, which needs to be kept under watch. All other issues could be considered as being of low priority, but it still requires conscious monitoring as the conditions may change afterwards. The preparation of the environmental threat and opportunities, it involves dividing the environment into different sectors and then analyzing the impact of each sector on the organization. A comprehensive Environmental threat and opportunity matrix requires subdividing each environmental sector into sub-factors, and then impact of each sub-factor on the organization is described in the form of a statement. Now, when we take into consideration the rise in the prices of the raw material, suppose the supplier is thinking of increasing the price of the raw material by some amount, which does not much impact. It is negligible, okay, as compared to the bulk order place. Here, the company gives a low priority. In the matrix, it would come as a low, but slowly and steadily, when it starts affecting, that means if the prices, supplier rises the prices on the higher side, and it starts affecting the uh, cost of the product, okay, because based upon the raw material cost, the cost of the product is decided. So here, when the raw material producer thinks of increasing the price of the raw material to a certain extent where it starts affecting the price of the product for the companies, here the company has to intervene and take action on this matter. See whether they can think of increasing the price of the offering the finished product by convincing the customers genuinely that the prices of the raw material have gone up, or it has to adjust at its level somewhere else by achieving the economies of scale. So it depends upon the company how it adjusts with these changes. This is one example which I quoted with reference to raw material suppliers. Now, coming to the next part, in 1979, Michael Porter came up with a simple framework for assessing and evaluating the competitive strength and position of a business organizations. He identified the 5 forces which act upon the business situations, uh, which help in analyzing the scenario from these 5 perspectives. These 5 forces act upon the organizations or on the businesses, and the company has to analyze these forces from time to time. They have to keep a check on this, and it is utmost important for the survival in the business markets. Now, here, if you see the 5 forces which govern the organization with reference to the strategic decisions are the threat of new entrants, bargaining power of the suppliers, bargaining power of buyers, threat of substitute products, and the rivalry among competing firms, that is the competitive market, competition which exists in the market. Now, now we start with the first part, that is the threat of new entrants. So always the organizations, they have the firms they have the threat of the new entrants. The firms recognize that maybe the suppliers can be a firm's competitor by forward integrating, or the buyers can be the competitors by going for the backward integrations. Many firms have integrated forward, if you consider the pharmaceutical industries, by acquiring the distributors and wholesalers. The firms choosing to enter a new market, and those producing products are adequate substitutes for existing products, which can become a company's competitors. Now, when we take into consideration this aspect of threat of new entrants, the first one foremost thing is identify new when the companies are new, when they want to enter into the market. Now here it depends upon the overall attractiveness of that particular segment. Now one thing here companies should do, they should identify the new entrants, who are the new entrants in that particular field, who will be our competitors, because there is a threat for the existing companies as far as the market share, grabbing of market share is considered. The entry of firm depends upon barriers to entry and reaction from the industry participants. Entry barrier makes a new firm difficult to enter an industry and offer place them, and after place them at a competitive disadvantageous position ever when they are able to enter. Now here when we take these barriers to entry into consideration, the existing competitors try to develop barriers for these competitors to enter. An absence of entry barrier increases the probability that new entrant can operate profitably. The economy scales, as far as the economies of scales is considered, economies of scales can be achieved by uh, development in the market businesses and functioning and related to functions like marketing, manufacturing, research and development, and purchasing aspect. Now here when the company is established in the market, okay, so when the people are purchasing the product, they are more loyal to the offerings offered by the companies. Down the line, when the company enters the growth phase, it starts gaining the market share, which is not easy for the new entrant. The new entrant is in the introduction stage, and he cannot, the new entrant cannot achieve the economies of the scale directly when it enters, because it has to spend a huge amount in making its place, creating awareness among the masses. Here they have to spend on advertising, on promotions, in penetrating the market. That's why the prices would be high, and as the product is new, people are not aware. Slowly and steadily it will gain the own place in the market. Hence, economies of scales will not be achieved for a new entrant, while against this, those companies which exist, for them, they would have already achieved this mark. Now today, mass customization is one of the very important strategy which the companies are using. When one thinks of uh, designing the offerings based upon the mass customization, easily the companies can achieve economies of the scale where the uh, expenditures are spread over due to more demand from the customers. Similarly, the other aspect is product differentiation. It serves as one of the barrier to the entry for the new entrants. Now, when the new company enters, if it enters with something new offering or something which is unique with reference to technology or some other item or product, then it has a edge over the existing uh, companies. But suppose if the existing company has its own place, has its own brand name with reference to differentiation attribute, then it becomes a barrier for the new entering firm or new entering organization where it has to compete with these existing competitors. The capital requirements of the company is huge. Competing in new industry requires a firm to have the resources to invest. It should have the large pool of manpower. It should have the manufacturing facilities located near the resources so as to cut down the transportation costs where it can cut down the transportation cost. Similarly, with reference to promotional aspect, the amount of money invested is more initially when the company is new. It requires more of the uh, capital to be raised or invested here. When the company is new in the market, even the customers are not aware about the product and the company. The supplier's trustworthiness has to be gained. So it's challenging for the new organization or a new company to manage the capital requirements. The next part is the switching cost. So switching cost means they are the one-time cost which the customer incurs when they buy from a different company or a different manufacturer. Here, the psychic cost is also involved from the customer's perspective. When a customer thinks of switching from the regular offering to the some other offering, the customer gives a thought, the customer maybe visits the place, the customer has to again go through the consumer buying behavior process to think a lot about whether to purchase a new offering with from this new entrant. So here it involves switching cost. Now a new entrant has to offer lower prices to attract the customers, but when the new entrant is in the introduction phase, it hardly becomes difficult for these companies to attract the buyer by uh, offering the goods at a lower cost, unless and until he formulates a new strategy, he comes up with some new strategy. Now here you can take an example of today we have the digital mode. If the company thinks of opting the digital mode of channel of distribution, in that case the company can think of offering the goods at a lower price when the company is not involving the intermediaries in between. So if this business model is inculcated, then definitely the company is able to provide the offerings at a low cost to the customers. access to distribution channels. Now, it can be a strong entry barrier where what happens usually, though distributors, the retailers, they are set by the existing companies. So, for a new entrant or new company, it becomes difficult to enter the channel of distribution. Suppose if the new company goes to a set retailer or a distributor for that particular area with that offering, naturally the dealer or the distributor, there is a doubt in their minds about this new product. It would be just a trial basis or on the trial and error basis. Otherwise, the company has to think about new distributors or dealers in that areas. Many a times the companies have they have the tie-ups with dealers and distributors on the grounds that they cannot stock the competitors goods also. Now, unless and until the companies have high quality products, they cannot enter such type of contract or negotiation with the distributors. In such cases, the new entrant has to think about new options of intermediaries. The cost disadvantage of independent of scale. Now, proprietary product technology, which is favorable access to raw materials, desirable locations, and government subsidies are the examples of this. Again, there are the government policies like licensing and permitting requirements. Here, the government controls the entry of industries into that particular market. So, the new entrant has to adhere to the norms of the government also. Like a company may have certain certifications or licenses which are mandatory from the government point of view. Expected retaliation is with reference to the reactions of the existing competitors with reference to the new entrant. So what are the reactions which the other firms react? Suppose if the company, the new entrant uh, enters with some differentiation strategy with reference to product offering or maybe pricing, then naturally the competitors will raise the eyebrows with reference to this, and they will start reacting in terms of maybe many a times if you see that when a company comes to know that the competitor has entered with some unique differentiation in the product, they start themselves advertising more to secure their market share or offer some promotional offerings are offered to the customers so that the customer gets sticked to their offering and the customer does not switch to the competitor products. Now coming to the next part, bargaining, whether the PPT is visible.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
With reference to the bargaining power of the suppliers. Now here, supplier is one of the important stakeholder of the organization. Now, it depends upon the position of the company. If you consider B2B business, okay, industrial for the industrial goods, If in that particular area or zone the suppliers are very less, if there are very few suppliers, then they have the edge over the organizations because they supply the raw material to many companies. So here they are in the driving seat, and according to their needs and demands, the organizations have to mold the terms. If the company rise the price of the raw material, okay, if the company thinks of rising the uh, prices of raw material in this case, and the suppliers are more few in number and the buyers are more, in this case there is no option for the organizations but to stick to these prices. Here they don't have their say, they cannot say anything here as they are dependent upon the suppliers. But against this, if there are few suppliers, if there are more suppliers, okay, then the companies also they do have options. They may think of changing the supplier. So it depends upon the situations. Many a times genuinely it happens that the supplier is not able to supply the raw materials, maybe due to one or the other things which are affecting the suppliers. In this case the company has to think about the options, how they can build up the gap, whether they have to uh, think about other supplier options. They suppliers usually tend to be powerful when they are concentrated or organized. When there are few substitutes, when the supplied product is an important input, or when the costs of the switching suppliers are high, the suppliers integrate downstream. So the best defense are to build win-win relations with the suppliers or use multi-supply sources. This is the best option for the organizations in the competitive era, so that there is no dependency on a single supplier. If you have more suppliers, you are opening the doors. The company is opening the doors to other suppliers. They maintain the relations with them, and you can say the company is not dependent. And even for the supplier, it's not the monopoly policy. So here, many a times the companies have to judge these suppliers. Now, also the new entrant or the new company which is entering, if it ties up with the existing suppliers, if they place more bulk orders, what would happen to the existing organizations? That is the factor which should be uh, undertaken by these existing companies. So nobody can predict certainty in business. The business climate or scenario is much of uncertainty. Now, the next is the bargaining power of buyers. Now, here a segment is unattractive if the buyers possess strong or growing bargaining power. Buyers will try to force prices down, demand more quality or services, and set competitors against each other. because this is possible. You might have seen in the FMCG categories or generic products where the buyer has more options today because of the competition. The buyers demands the quality based products at the lower prices. If the competitor allows, if the competitor offers rather the goods at a lower price and offers a good quality, naturally the customers are going to shift to those products. Now the bargaining power of this buyer grows when they become more concentrated or organized. When the product represents a significant fraction of the buyer's cost, when it is undifferentiated. When the offerings are undifferentiated, then only this scenario is possible. And also the switching cost for the buyers is low. That is also one scenario because switching costs are more for the customers usually. When the buyers are price sensitive because of low profits, or when buyers can integrate upstream, then also the buyers have the growing bargaining power. Now here to protect themselves, the sellers might select buyers who have least power to negotiate or switch suppliers. And that's why today we see the companies think of having the loyalty aspect. They are building the defense mechanism through inculcating loyalty programs among customers. Loyalty benefits or loyalty cards are given to the customers. Now, this is the reason that they are building up their defense mechanism, placing the product on the basis of quality. Some differentiation, that is the USP, unique selling proposition, is there. Some unique feature is made available in the offering or pricing strategy. Through any strategies, the sellers think of retaining the customers. The sellers take much efforts. The companies today is taking lot of efforts to see to it that the customers are retained. They are not switching to the competitors' offerings. Now, threat of the substitute products or substitute offerings. Now, segment is unattractive when there are actual or potential substitutes for the product available. Substitute place a limit on prices and on the profits that a segment can earn. Now, a company has to monitor the price trends in the substitutes closely. If technology advances or competition increases in these substitute industries, prices and profits in the segments are likely to come down or they are likely to fall. So, when the prices of a particular offering they rise due to one or the other reason, the customer depends upon the type of the category of that offering. The customer will always try to switch or try to look out for substitute offerings. So in this case, there is a threat for the organizations that when the customer is moving on towards this substitute product, if it is for the temporary basis, it's okay. But because many a times what happens, the customers for this time, maybe if the prices rise, they just switch to other product and again they come to the original brand or original product. So they are switching customers. and also the company do has the loyal customers also. The in spite of increase in the price also, the customers are loyal and they try to purchase the offerings. Now, when the competitor enters with the substitute means it's a threat for the organizations. Now here the companies have to give more emphasis as far as convincing the customer is considered, advertising is considered, the pushing through the distributors or dealers is taken into account. So from each and every aspect, the company thinks of defensive, going into defensive mode by protecting their interest and safeguarding their customers. Now here, coming to the next part is the intensity of rivalry among competitors. Now here, a segment is unattractive if it already contains numerous strong and aggressive competitors. It is even more unattractive if the segment is stable or it is declining. If the segment is stable or declining, the company starts to wind up the businesses and leave overall. If the plant capacity addition are done in large increments, if the fixed costs are much higher, if the exist barriers are higher, or the competition has high stakes in staying in the segment, then this scenario is possible. Now, these conditions will lead frequently to price wars in between the competitors. There are the advertising battles many a times. New product introduction will make it more expensive to compete. So here, how many competitors are there with reference to that particular zone or that particular area? It depends upon that. If there are few competitors, then they maybe we can say that they are fighting among themselves for the particular market share, or it's a healthy competition, like all of them they are safeguarding their own market share and safeguarding the interest of the customers also. There are numerous or equally balanced competitors also. That is, we say it's a healthy competition where the competitors, they think of having their own strategies, their own market share. Here the competitors may believe in the option of, like, you also have the market share and we also are in the market. So there is no intense rivalry among the competitors. And both and all the competitors believe that it's a part of the game or the business. And competition motivates the companies to be on toes. Now, there is also the slow grow industry growth. Now, here, these are all factors with reference to rivalry among the competitors. If there is slow growth in the industry itself, then in spite of having more competitors, uh, even the companies push the offerings in the market, the customer is not going to purchase at a faster pace because that is not the need of the hour, or the customers, though convinced, will not purchase the offerings. That is the slow industry growth, where the industry itself is having the problems, slowing down. Now, high fixed cost or high storage costs. Here, many times the fixed cost or on the higher sides, or the storage costs are on the higher sides. Now, it depends upon the companies how they handle this costs, because this is going to ultimately affect the revenues of the organization, or it's going to affect the investments also. The lack of differentiation or low switching costs. Now, here, when the company has the lack of differentiation strategy and a new competitor enters with some differentiation option, then naturally the customer is going to switch over to the competitor product here. It is going to move ahead. The customers will switch based upon this low switching cost. So here, if the uh, without much headache, if the customer can switch to other products, we say it's a low switching cost. That's why for the companies, they should take care of the customers in such a way that the customer should feel that the cost of switching involved is too high, because maybe the same service might not be expected from the competitor product. Maybe the other company might not give the credit facilities in case of B2B. So here, while designing the strategies, the companies have to take into consideration this aspect of the lack of differentiation as well as the low switching costs factor. Now here, when we take the high strategic stakes, that is when the company comes up with the certain strategic decisions. Now you can say aggressive mode. Okay. Uh, if you take an example of a company like Amul used the aggressive mechanism or aggressive strategy during this pandemic uh, to penetrate into the market. You might have seen they invested a lot. They promoted the offerings through investments by utilizing the idle plant capacities, by increasing the frequency of advertisements on the televisions, by increasing the margins to be given to the dealers or distributors to push the product in the market. So this was the strategic move by Amul, which resulted in increasing its turnover. Now here, other competitors, the milk and dairy based uh, manufacturers, okay, they thought since it is the pandemic era, nobody is going to purchase that offering, milk based products. Amul also introduced new offerings. Okay, maybe many new products were introduced during this pandemic era, while the competitors thought of line pruning, that is editing the product portfolio or churning the products from the market, because maybe the people in the anticipation that people will not demand the product because of the economic slowdown. But here, against this Amul thought perceived that since people will be at home, they are at home, the demand would be rather more than the usual routine orders. And hence, they took up the aggressive penetration strategy for their offerings in the market. So, here, this definitely has affected the competitors. Now, switching the customers from this existing brand to the other brand becomes much more difficult. Also, there are high exit barriers for these companies. Competition today but growing more intense down the line. Now we had the competitions, cutthroat competition in between the Coca-Cola, Pepsi, and the Coca-Cola brand, which also reflected in the advertisements. That is, they had the marketing warfare. So there are many brands. Now, if you see today, the ready-to-eat segments are aggressively promoting the offerings, even in the technology-based products like electronic goods, the televisions, the smartphones. Here also you will find there is the intense competition. Or for that matter, if you take automobile sector also there is cutthroat competition going on. So with the emphasis on different attributes, the company thinks of aggressive promotional strategies in the market. So at a single time, the company has to handle many of the forces which act upon the organization or the businesses. Hence, it has to have the detailed analysis of the scanning of environment, internal as well as external assessment of the environment, which includes the competitors, which also includes the suppliers, which includes the investors, the customers. Also, the competitors has to be taken into consideration. Now, this was the last part of this unit. Any doubts?
No, ma'am.
In the next session, we will start from the next unit. Okay, today we will stop here.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay,
Thank you, ma'am.
thank
Okay, ma'am. Thank you.
okay.
Thank you, ma'am.